are live. I want to thank everyone for tuning into a very special edition of Off the Record on the People's Podcast this afternoon. We have a magnificent guest with us today, one who is going to give us some amazing information as well as inspiration, and that is none other than the world-renowned Reverend Conrad Tillard. He is an amazing author, an activist, a man of the cloth, and a good brother, and someone who was very special and instrumental in many people's lives. But today is personal to me. It's an honor to have you here, sir. How are you doing, my brother?
Well, I'm great, and the honor is really mine. I've been watching your program for several years now, and I've enjoyed many of your interviews. And I certainly am doing this, obviously, for one of my best friends in the world, your uncle, Minister Jamil Muhammad. He certainly is just an important person in my life. And of course, your late and almost sainted mother. So it's a pleasure. I watched you as a baby, and a boy, and now a man. So I'm happy to be here.
Yes, sir. Wonderful. Thank you very much. And
Assalamu alaikum.
walaikum salam, sir. And Sister Naima sends the greetings. Mimi, walaikum salam. Everyone is saying walaikum salam. Thank you, everyone.
I remember Mimi.
Yes,
Yes.
sir. Thank you, everyone who is showing love all around the world. Well, while I was preparing to get started for the questions this morning, I was looking at one of your sermons and watching it, and it was called "Lord, Have Mercy on My Soul," and it was very timely.
Oh,
And yes, sir,
yes.
very timely, and it was deep, dealing with the spiritual, dealing with grace. And you on a Sunday afternoon, sir, why is grace so important for us as a people, but important for us as a family and individuals as well, sir?
Yeah, one of the things that I didn't really understand growing up in the church, as so many of us do, we don't really understand theology. You know, we're in the church, we see all that's going on in the church, and we hear people talking, and we see, most people who are Christians are culturally Christians. We grow up culturally Christians because we've grown up in the United States, and in most of the cities and small towns, if you grow up in the church, you're culturally Christian. Same with Muslims who grew up in the Muslim world. They're culturally Muslims, but not necessarily have a great understanding of theology. And, you know, I used to really talk about people in the church didn't do this, didn't do that. Um, but what I really began to understand was not that that's a good thing that people aren't right and that they do wrong, but I began to understand this concept, the theological concept of grace. And I didn't understand it as a boy, but during my transition from Mosque number 7 and in the nation, going from Boston to Cambridge, Massachusetts, going from being surrounded by a lot of people to spending a lot of time by myself, and there were many things that happened in my life, and I was in a very a period of searching, and the concept of grace, the God's love for us that we don't deserve, we can't earn, but it's a gift freely given, and I learned it, I understood it, it became real to me, and then it became easier for me to extend grace to other people. And I think that's what I love about it. We ask for God's forgiveness, but we also have to be able to extend it to other people.
Beautiful.
So
Yes,
it's a
sir.
central tenet of the church, but a lot of people, they really don't understand it.
Yes, sir. Wonderful. And people are sending positive energy your way, Brother Reverend. And thank you all for showing love to our brother. I wanted to ask you, you spoke about growing up in the church. At what age, when did you find out that you had a love for delivering the word of God?
Well, I grew up as I said, culturally Christian. My stepfather is a Baptist minister, um, and my grandparents were very involved in the church. My father did not go to church. Okay, he was a very ethical man, a very moral man, but he did not go to church. And so, if I was with my mother and my stepfather in Atlanta, I went to church. When I was in D.C. with my father, I didn't go to church. I had a lot of friends who went to church. But it wasn't until 1983 when Jesse Jackson ran for president, November 1983, when he said, I seek the presidency of the United States. It was a transformative moment for me. It was a aha moment. The lights came on, and I began to find purpose. Now, I still did not yet know that I wanted to preach, but I knew I wanted to be like Jesse Jackson. I wanted to, fortunately, Brother Josh, when I was coming up, and I thank God for that period, we still, as young people, aspired to go to college. Okay,
Mm, mm,
uh,
mm.
I right there at Francis L. Cardozo High School, right there across from Howard University. We had teachers from Howard, and young people still wanted to go to college. Now, many of us didn't have any idea what we wanted to do when we got to college, but it was
Mm, mm.
ingrained in the African American community at that time, seek higher education. And so it was just a short time that I was somewhat aimless because Reverend Jackson running for president gave me all the focus that I needed. And I quickly became involved in that campaign in Philadelphia. I began to travel around the country, organizing young people. And I really, really was turned on passionately about this black preacher from the south side of Chicago that was tall and articulate and strong. And when he took to the stage and debated the white senators and others, government officials who were running, it blew my mind because he was not reluctant, he was not reticent, he was strong, he was proud. I remember when he went to get Lieutenant Robert Goodman from Syria. And this is
Mm.
around the time I really became aware of our dear minister, Minister Farrakhan.
Yes, sir.
And they went to Syria, and I never will forget, I was watching the press conference, and Jesse Jackson and Minister Farrakhan and Brother Akbar, they were in the Rose Garden with Ronald Reagan
Yes,
and,
sir.
and George Bush. And when I saw Jesse just seize the mic and just dominate the press conference in the Rose Garden, I said, this is a man that I want to be like. And so that's where the early seeds, because I never aspired to be a minister. I'll tell
Mm.
you more about the person who told me that they believed I was born to preach the word of God. But I never really aspired to be a minister, at least not consciously. But it was at that time that I decided that that's what I wanted to do.
Beautiful. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, wonderful. And people continue to show you love, sir. I wanted to stay right there. Could you let us know who was the person that told you that you were born to speak the word of God?
Well, that was Minister Louis Farrakhan. Uh, uh, I, I aspired to be an attorney. Uh,
Mm,
I have four grandparents that were born black and poor in Mississippi,
mm.
and not neither of my grandparents had any formal education. I had one grandmother that graduated from high school, but I had a cousin who became an attorney, and others in my family that sought higher education, as we do in the black community. Each generation gets better and better, and they learn more. And so I wanted to be an attorney, and I really aspired to be an attorney. And my senior year, I applied to law schools, and I got into several, but I had my heart set on Georgetown. And I did get into Georgetown Law School. That was an interesting story. But the minister had other plans. I remember I was at Georgetown. I had registered for school, and I was about to embark upon a legal career. And one day I was in my space, and I called him. He had said earlier that he wanted me to stay in Philadelphia. That's where I was at the time. Your uncle was my minister, and he had left, and there were a lot of things going on in the mosque there. And I tried in vain to get accepted to a law school in Philadelphia, but just didn't work out. I was a well-known student activist in Philadelphia, and I don't know if that contributed to me not being able to get into a law school, but I had my heart set on Georgetown. And I called the minister one day, and I said, "Sir, what do you want me to do?" And he said to me, he said, "Brother, I didn't ask the messenger what he wanted me to do. I knew his mission. I salam alaikum." And he hung up the phone. And I sat there, and no, but then he said this before he hung up. He said, "Law is a fine career, but I believe you're born to preach the word of God." And I sat there, I considered it, and several days later, I left Washington and I went back to Philadelphia. And I guess the rest is history.
Beautiful. Yes, sir. And on that subject of education, sir, what advice do you give to people, young people, as far as the value and the importance of education to families, communities, but individuals as well?
You know, I think that one of the greatest uh, crimes that has been perpetuated upon us, and we perpetuate on ourselves, is to downplay education. Uh, all education is not just a college degree or a graduate degree. Education is also becoming a carpenter, becoming a plumber, an electrician, but you have to be educated to do all of those things.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Anything you want to do, you have to be educated. And we have to have a renaissance in the African American community and among our people, that we value education. Because,
Yes, sir.
see, when you value education, when you value learning, there's always something to learn. And so for me, it was a traditional liberal arts education. For some, it's professional training. It's becoming a lawyer, a doctor, a school teacher. But for others, it's vocational training. But all of that is education. And so all of our great leaders, from Booker T. Washington, Du Bois, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, they all emphasized the importance of education. And we have to keep that tradition alive in the Black community. That's critical.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Wonderful. And thank you very much. And thank you all for continuing to show love to our brother. Earlier, I was watching some more of your lectures and interviews and sermons and interviews. And as I was watching one, they kept referring to you as the hip hop minister when you were younger, and how connected. So, of course, I'm doing research, how connected you were to hip hop before it was the number 1 genre in the world,
Right.
before there was hip hop at the Super Bowl multiple years in a row, and it became what it is now. How were you so connected to hip hop, and did you see it becoming as popular as it is now?
Well, I mean, obviously, hip hop has far exceeded, I think, everyone's expectations for how dominant it would become in the world. When you see Snoop Dogg in the White House, and when you see every multinational corporation using rappers, and you see the level of mainstream success hip hop, has achieved, that was certainly a surprise to me. But I think I was blessed, obviously, to, you know, Minister Farrakhan initially was going to make me the minister of the Philadelphia Mosque.
Mm.
But that didn't work out. I came back to Philadelphia. I sat for 1 year, uh, and that didn't happen.
Mm.
I remember one day he mentioned to me, he said, what do you think about Los Angeles? And I said, well, sir, I don't know anybody in Los Angeles. And he said to me, I think he sensed what I was getting at. He said, well, you don't have to know anybody in Los Angeles. All you have to do is listen to those who are in Los Angeles.
Mm. Mm.
But whatever happened, he decided to send me to New York as the national youth and student minister. So I count that a blessing
Yes.
because that was coming to Harlem at a time when the crack era was raging. It was the golden age of hip hop, and I can't claim any credit for that. I was just placed in that situation, and of course, coming through Philadelphia and the strong mosque that was there, and the strength that you gathered from being in the nation in Mosque number 12 and having great teachers like your uncle, Minister Jamil Muhammad, and Minister Abdul Kareem Muhammad. I just had no fear of anything. Okay. And then, of course, I can't forget about my mentor in DC, who was really responsible, I think, probably more than anybody for me coming into the nation. That was Dr. Abdul Alim Muhammad, because everything I wanted to be as a college student, he was. And he gave me the model of somebody I could emulate. He was learned, he was articulate, he was strong. Everything I wanted to be, he was. And
Yes, sir.
so with that kind of background and the inspiration of the minister, when I got to New York City, and of course I spent a lot of time in New York City. My first, I have no, I have brothers, but I was the only child for many years. I'm my father's only child. But my first cousins grew up in Manhattan, and I spent a lot of time with them growing up in New York City. So I loved the city. I had an understanding of the city, and I remember the minister when he sent me there. He gave me some very, very wonderful advice, and I have to share this with you. He said to me, he said, brother, he said, take every speaking engagement that you get. He said, I
Mm.
don't care
Mm.
how big the group is, how small. He said, you're going to be invited by tenant associations, youth groups, civic associations. He said, take every one of them. And in a few years, he said, you'll be surprised, but you'll be known and loved by tens of thousands of people. And I lived to see that become true. I remember when I first got to New York and coming out of Philadelphia, and you know, nobody really hardly knew where the mosque was in Harlem. I couldn't
Mm.
get too many people to tell me where it was, it was a very significant time. There was a lot going on, and you know, we just were blessed in that way. But I followed that advice that he gave me, and I tried to be everywhere. I tried to do as much as I possibly could. Sometimes I would be in 5 boroughs in one day,
Mm.
trying to cram as much as I could into my ministry. And he was right. The day would come when tens of thousands of people would respect me, love me, and appreciate me. So the hip hop minister was actually a title that was given to me. And at first, I really rejected it. I didn't like it. Peter Noel, who's today a good friend of mine, he was a reporter at the time for the Village Voice. And it seemed like every week he was doing an expose on the nation. Every week he was writing, and he seemed to know everything that was going on in the mosque. And I remember he did one, and the title was "All in the Family," and it was the conflict between Brother Minister Khalid Abdul Muhammad and some of the laborers, and he just had all the details. But one of the things he did that really upset me was he called me the hip hop minister, the hip hop minister. And initially, I thought it to be disrespectful. I said, well, he's trying to be smart. He's trying to disrespect me, because you have to remember at that time, there were many believers who had served and been ministered to in that mosque by Minister Farrakhan. And there were still a lot of people who had known Malcolm X as their minister. And certainly I was still in my 20s, so I was incredibly insecure. And I certainly didn't want anybody bringing attention as if they didn't already know. I didn't want anyone bringing any more attention to the fact that I was probably in over my, I was probably in over my head, but I didn't like the term hip hop minister. But later, someone gave me some good advice, and they said, you really are fortunate to be a part of the hip hop generation, and why not? What's wrong with it? Embrace it, because I had already started working with the New York rappers, and in those days, hip hop was not this global international thing that it is. The rappers were very local. I mean, they all came to the mosque. They all came to my office. It didn't matter whether it was Andre Harrell or Puffy or all of the rappers we encountered, Biggie, Tupac, and so it was a local phenomenon. And I was blessed in number 7 because many of the brothers, and I have to give a great shout out to Brother Elijah, his brother Sunni. They knew a lot about the hip hop scene, and Minister Arthur, who's there now as the minister of Mosque number 7. He had come up in the Zulu Nation, and he knew a lot about the brothers, and all of the brothers from the boroughs knew a lot about the players in hip hop, and they brought them to me, and they brought me to them, and the only thing I had to do was to develop sincere relationships with them, to stand strong on my post, and I tried the best that I could, and this was very important. I never hung out with rappers. I knew my place. We engaged them, we worked with them, and so the title hip hop minister was not given to me because I was going around trying to be around rappers. I mean, when they were fighting and there were disputes, we were there. Captain Dennis was my captain at the time, so that was a strong captain. We had strong lieutenants, Captain Henry and Minister Anthony, and I mean Captain Anthony. Just had a very, very strong mosque number 7, and many of the believers were just significant and crucial in my success there throughout the city.
Beautiful. Yes, sir. Thank you very much. You're teaching per usual, Brother Reverend, and people are showing you love all around the world. I want to stay right there with the value of the connection between the hip hop artists, beef, and have been going on since the beginning of music, period, but hip hop primarily. Now to this recent year, so many artists we've lost, still doing beef. What is the responsibility of not just Muslims, Christians, members of the Jewish community, Catholics, but just the community as a whole to help try to guide and intervene in conflict with rappers?
Yeah, it's ironic because I worked very closely uh, with the rappers, and many of you may remember, um, you know, there were many beefs, but one in particular when Tribe Called Quest, who were a part of Zulu Nation, got into it with a group out of Harlem called Rex and Effects, who were part of a larger organization called Posse Deep.
Mm.
Uh, we were able to, um, through mediation, I think one night we spent 5 or 6 hours in the mosque bringing unity. And then, of course, when the hip hop East Coast, West Coast beef started, we were involved in that, talking to Suge Knight, talking to Tupac. I never will forget, there is a wonderful sister by the name of Jamie Foster Brown. She had a magazine at the time called Sister to Sister magazine.
Mm.
She had heard of our work, and she had covered the beef that we settled with Rex and Effects, and we became close. And she asked me if I would meet with Suge. Now, I didn't know what was going on yet with the hip hop East Coast West Coast beef, and I said, of course. I said, sure, I'll meet with him. And there was an award show in New York, and he was there. And she arranged the meeting. And so I went downtown to meet him at the Four Seasons Hotel on 57th Street. And he was on the 47th floor. And I left the mosque that day. And normally I would go with the captain. I would go with some of the brothers. But to be honest with you, I have to be honest with you, Josh. I knew nothing of him. And a man named Suge, I just didn't even understand
Yes,
what
sir.
was going on. I had met with others in the music industry, and it didn't ever register that I would need to go with anyone. So I went down with a brother I had grown up with in DC, Daryl Bartley, and my secretary, Brother Jean, the secretary of the mosque.
Mm.
It's just the two of us. And we got up on the 47th floor, and I was met by a phalanx of some of the biggest men I had ever seen in my life.
Mm. Mm.
And they all had on red jackets.
Yes, sir.
They
Yes,
all,
sir.
they all had on red. And later I would find out it was Buntry and Jake, and these were Suge Knight's men, okay?
Yes, sir. Yes,
And
sir.
they were very respectful, but they were some of the strongest men I had ever seen. I mean, they were physically huge, had a very intimidating presence, but the Lord takes care of fools and babies, because I had absolutely no intimidation. I got into the suite, and Mary J. Blige was there, and Casey,
Mm.
and Suge Knight's wife, and his baby at the time, and I just began. He came out, and when he came out, he was he was bigger than all of them. And I said, "Oh God, what am I into?" But I started teaching, and I
Mm.
started sharing with him. I had heard about the division, and this is honest to God. I told him that day. I said, "Brother, you've built something great." I said, "If you don't stop what you're doing, you're going to destroy everything that you built."
Mm.
And of course, the rest is history. And I'm not saying that I was prophetic, but it was very evident to me that what he was doing would not last. I never forget. I started teaching so strong that everybody in the room, men and Mary and all, they just started focusing on what I was saying. And
Mm.
I could
Mm.
see that he saw his crew was a little too tuned in to me. And he said, "You know what?" He said, "You know what? Let's get together tomorrow." But the first thing he asked me when I came in the room is, "You know Captain Dennis? Do you know Captain Shahid?" I said, "Yes, I do." Now, I didn't know. I tell you, I got out of that whole suite, and the first thing I did was got on the phone with Captain. I said, "Brother Captain, what's going on? You got me up." Oh, laughed and he broke it down to me and told me who he was and so forth and so on. I said, well, I tell you what, as I told Suge, I tell you what, why don't you come to Harlem tomorrow? And I said, I told Brother Captain, I said, I want all the FOI there. And then I got on the phone with Africa Bambaataa and I said, I want you to
5, 4, and we are live. Thank you, everyone who was watching and staying tuned into the People's Podcast. Our brother, the great Reverend Conrad Tillard, has been giving us some amazing information as well as inspiration today. Thank you very much, sir, for your patience.
My pleasure.
Yes, sir. Okay, and thank you, everyone who's staying locked in. If we may, can we go back? We got to get this so we can share this again. So you're meeting. Yes, sir. We got to get the Suge Knight story. We got to get that story one more time. Yes, sir. So you're
you know, again, that second day, since he caught me so off guard the first day, you know, one of the things that the minister used to tell us, and he used to tell Captain Dennis, and he said it to me. He said, when the people in New York see you, they should see strength. And I had wonderful brothers, and wherever I went, they were there with me. Some of the wonderful brothers, Brother Robert, Brother Carl, Brother Fabian, Brother Michael. I mean, just good brothers and all the men were there. But this particular day, again, the New York executives were people you could talk to. I mean, Andre Harrell and Russell Simmons and Puffy, they were not people of that you would be intimidated by. They did not carry themselves in that way. And people have to remember, this is 1993. This is before, Suge Knight is a household name, okay? And so when I see a big hulking of a man come out and with his men, again, who were just, very, very strong men. No other way to describe the men that now I know were the Piru Bloods. Now, I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know about Pirus, okay? So there was a learning curve. But I knew one thing. The next day, when we met, after I talked to Captain Dennis and marshaled all the forces of the FOI and the Zulu Nation, I knew that when he came to Sylvia's that day on 126th Street and Lenox Avenue, he would indeed see strength. And even if he had brought his whole entourage, they would have still been outmanned at that point. And it was very evident when he pulled up in that yellow cab with Jake Robles, his wife and baby, that he was outmanned. And but we had a wonderful a time. But I did have to reassure him in a way and in words that, I guess with the gang mentality, you see that many men, you think, okay, well, now I'm on his turf. But I had to help him understand that's not what we are. We're not into that. These are your brothers, and we are brothers. And we're just trying to talk to you, because I think by that time he had already flushed Andre Harrell's head down a toilet, and he was causing quite a stir in New York. There was palpable fear of him. There was real fear of him. And of course, we were the only people that could stand up to him. And we did it a number of times during that era. So, that was a funny story, because Captain Dennis, as he often did, he knew a lot more than I would later find out. But I always had to get to the bottom of it. And of course, he assured me that, yes, there was some issues going on. And I didn't know that we had men at Bad Boy. I didn't know that we had men down at Andre's office on security. So Suge Knight, I think, was upset because he had tried to double back and he saw the strength of the FOI there. And so it all worked out in the long run. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And thank you very much. And people were saying, Walaikum salam, Sister Amina Haq, and so many believers around
Oh
the
yeah,
world. But New York is showing
Brother
love in the house.
James and Sister Amina Hart. Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes.
sir. Wonderful. Now, I wanted to ask you, sir, when you
Hmm.
have accomplished so much in ministry, in the public eye,
Hmm.
what makes you still stay
Hmm.
active as far as being an activist on the front line? Why do you still put your life on the line to stand up for issues when you don't
Hmm.
have to at
Hmm.
this point in your career?
Well, I think it's because I came of age. Again, you know, Jesse Jackson, in truth, was my first influence. And in that 1983 campaign, uh, Jesse was, he was the man. The focus of Black America was on him. Now, this coincided with the minister beginning his public ministry. He had been rebuilding the nation, but if you weren't really in the nation, you did not know. I remember seeing flyers in DC in '82, Christ imminent return, and I
Mm,
remember it was at a church down on New Jersey Avenue, and one of the most powerful um, visuals for me uh, with the nation was I was on a 70 bus one day, and this really handsome brother got on the bus with a big boom box radio. He had on a brown three-piece suit, crisp white shirt, brown bow tie, clean shaven face, and hair cut low. And in those days, in DC, if you got on the bus and you were loud or you had something you were selling or saying, the crowd might tell you that, turn that off, you know. But this brother had the radio, and it's like he just stared down the whole bus, and nobody said a word. And
mm,
he was blasting it, and it was somebody preaching. Of course, later I found out that was Minister Farrakhan, and the brother was Brother Ernest. and it was Brother Ernest. And I said, wow, that brother was fearless, okay? And so I didn't know a lot about the minister. My stepfather mentioned him before, he coming out of the civil rights movement. But during that campaign, you kept hearing about him. And at first, I was like a lot of people. I was like, what is he doing? Why doesn't he keep his mouth shut? He's destroying the campaign. But
mm,
I didn't
mm,
understand a lot of things then. Number one, uh, I gave my heart and soul to Reverend Jackson, and I didn't understand he wasn't running to be president. Okay. So a few
mm,
years ago, when the Bernie Sanders young people got upset, I understand
mm.
because we thought Jesse was going to be president, but I didn't realize he wasn't running to be president. He was running to challenge the party, unsophisticated and young. We were just true believers. And then I didn't understand also what the minister was saying. But later I would draw great strength from them being together, because you have to remember that was the first time a disciple of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Dr. Martin Luther King came together, and their unity was very powerful in those days. It was a tremendous unity, and so I think coming of age and being blessed to sit under and with both of those men, to watch them, to learn from them. I think I really, don't really know anything else to do. And sometimes it has been frustrating because, when you come up with mentors like that, you have a sense of obligation, a sense of responsibility, a sense of commitment. And it's not always easy. It's not always easy. And but I teach Black history at City College. I teach the Civil Rights Movement. I teach the Black Power movement. And I have always just been, you know, thoroughly inspired by the story of Black people. I think it's one of the most heroic stories of any people ever told in the annals of history. And I think it's important that young people learn and know about Booker T. Washington and Du Bois and Marcus Garvey and David Walker and Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth and Fannie Lou Hamer and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm and the minister and Jesse and Dr. King. And so, you know, when I got to college in 1983, we were deeply concerned about things that had happened 20 years earlier in 1963 or 40 years earlier in 1943. Well, young people today, when you teach them about, you know, most of my students, they weren't born when Tupac was killed or Biggie. So it's actually history for them to learn about it. It's history for them to learn about the 1984 presidential campaign. It's history for them to learn about the nation. So I enjoy this story, and I think we have to continue to tell the story, to tell our young people, to reinforce the narrative so that our people continue to find strength and hope in those that have gone before us.
Wonderful. Yes, sir. And thank you again. And on behalf of myself, my family, and the viewing audience of the People's Podcast, we want to let you know that we thank God for your sacrifices, many sacrifices, sir, and the sacrifices of your family. We salute you and we honor you, sir. This is home for you. And man, we just wanted to make sure, I wanted to make sure that I publicly acknowledge the fact that my mother she didn't like me having superheroes that were white or anything that wasn't Black. And especially when I was little, if it was on the TV, if it wasn't the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, it was going to be Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, Dr. Abdul Ali Muhammad, and Minister Conrad at that time out of New York. She wanted us, you were the superheroes that we were looking to, and I still admire and still aspire to be like, and I study you, sir. And I just want to thank you publicly for being someone who kept me. I wanted to dress like y'all. I wanted to have the, man, you know, so for people who are coming up, like you said, especially young people, I don't think they understand the value of that time period of the 80s and the 90s, but the FOI in that time period, the ministers, I mean, rock stars. You know, like, you know, you were and are, but I'm just saying, we were growing up, man, Minister Conrad, when you pulled up, it was like, hey, I know who that is. You know, so it's an honor to have you, to be able to interview you, sir. I just want to let you know something for showing you love. We have a few more questions for our esteemed guest. Thank you. Sister Mina Hawk is saying she agrees. Brother Stephen Muhammad said he was there with you that day, sir, at dealing with
Brother
the
Steve,
Suge. Yes, sir.
Stephen
And
three.
yes, sir. He said Jada Pinkett Smith also attended the mosque at that time. Brother Daniel E, Sister Miriam, thank you very much, Sister Minister Aisha. People are just showing you love all around the world. Thank you. I wanted to ask you about, all these years later, we're still dealing with unity, or trying to get unity with Malcolm X and the nation and just Black people, period. How did you handle that in New York, dealing with the Apollo Theater and this, our sister, the Queen Betty Shabazz, coming together with the, how did you handle, you know, navigating through that, and what can we do to keep the peace in 2024?
Well, you know, man, I was blessed. First of all, I mean, I love people. So that's the first thing. You know, you have to really, to do ministry in any religion or any denomination or any faith, you have to love people. You know, some people say that they're ministers and they're not people persons. And I just don't understand how a man or woman that does love people could be a minister. Okay. And so I had a great family. I was raised by, I was blessed to have a father and stepfather, a wonderful mother, aunts and grandparents, again, that instilled in me a heart of love for people and respect for people. And then, of course, having great teachers, Jesse and the minister, and minister really.
There we go. I'm about to say, come on today. Thank you, everyone who was watching. We're right here, sir. Right. We're waiting on you, sir. And thank you everyone who was watching. Continues to show
Can you
love.
hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you. Just can't see you, sir.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can
Okay,
hear you.
you
Just can't
can't
see your
see
camera.
me. Okay.
No, sir.
Can you see me now? Well, I can
Yes,
see
sir.
myself.
Yes, sir. Just turn
You
to the
can't
side.
see me.
No, it's
Turn
just
it. Okay, I'll try that. Now can you see me?
okay. Yes, sir.
Is that
Yes,
any
sir.
better?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Perfect.
So what I was saying was, you know, I was, I had a mentor that I could talk to and that advised me. And I was blessed also with great laborers. I had Sister Captain Karima Muhammad was there, and we even had Sister Amina Rasul. And of course, my partner in the ministry there was Captain Dennis. And when we first got to Harlem, there was a lot of tension, even at 116th Street, the historic site of Mosque Number 7. Never will forget the first day I went there to get a haircut, and that was my Captain Dennis would engage people at the soul food restaurant, Sylvia's. He had done that in Buffalo. My tactic was to go to the people wherever they were. So I went to 116th Street, and I remember the late brother Hassan, the barber, who owned the shop and ran the shop. He had been the minister's barber, and he cut my hair. And of course, I was young, and I engaged him in the minister attempting to rebuild the nation. And it didn't go too well at first. I think the first time I went, I left there with him holding the razor over my head and said, I should have cut his throat then. But I was undeterred and undaunted. And we kept going back and we kept engaging them. And at the time, Imam Ali Rashid was there. And time I left Number 7, when I would go there, they would secure me as though I was the imam of that masjid. And we developed brotherhood and love and unity. And, even when I met Ilyasa and her sisters, and Dr. Shabazz, I never will forget. She was very brusque with me and short. And I experienced a lot of that. Dr. Ben was the same way. And I called the minister and he would tell me, he'd say, well, brother, he said, just take it. He said, just take it. She has a lot of pain. And I did take it. And eventually, Dr. Shabazz grew to have a fondness of me, and Ilyasa and several other her sisters. We became close. We like cousins. So, and we continue those relationships today. And it was a very important and moving moment. I can still remember that first day when Minister Farrakhan and Dr. Betty Shabazz met at LaGuardia Airport in a conference room. And it was just very moving to me, one who had read the autobiography of Malcolm X as a teenager, and to see them in a room together. And then, of course, that culminated with the event at the Apollo Theater. It was a great time and a great period. Black people, we have to continue to tell these stories and give hope to our people. Now, let me just say one thing about this hip hop thing, because after all of that work with the hip hop community, I think you remember around 1999, I fell out with men in the hip hop community. When I left Number 7, I went to school up in Boston. I came back and I started an organization called A Movement for Change. It was a hip hop oriented organization designed to organize young people to get them politically active. But we also had what we called a campaign for dignity. I saw the hip hop community going in a dark direction as more money got pumped into it, more influences came around it. Uh, I saw that the rappers and the moguls were no more accessible to the community. The content was changing. Gangster rap had taken over, and then another form of rap took over. That which led others, obviously, and eventually Little Kim, and even the culmination of that today, Sexy Red, and all the different rap styles that came out that were a vast departure from what we were hearing in the mid '80s and the early '80s and the late '80s. And so I was, again, Jamie Brown. She said, called me one day and said, Minister, she said, there's a young man named Shine that is on trial with P. Diddy, and he's being left out to dry. Can you go check on him? And I went and I checked on him, and we developed a relationship. I'd go every day to court with him, and we'd go to lunch every day. And I began to talk to him about what he could do with his music. I gave him a copy of Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On" album, and I told him, you have the possibility of transforming lives and changing the world. Well, to make a long story short, everyone knows that brother was Shine. He was convicted, and when he got convicted, I was angry because that day he was found guilty. Puffy was exonerated, and Anthony Wolf Jones, and they went out to the throngs of people, and all of the great lawyers, Johnny Cochran, Ben Brafman, and Shine was in the courthouse in Lower Manhattan, and he was all alone. And because I was a minister there with him, they allowed me to go into the cell and get his jewelry and his personal effects, and he was handcuffed to the wall, and I took his personal effects to his mother and grandmother, and I got angry, and I said, these parents and these families are giving these young people to these executives the way young people or parents give children to a coach or to a teacher, and they expect them to cultivate their lives and help them to become something, not to end up in jail and destroyed. And so I called a conference, and the conference was to address the executives, to say, you've got a responsibility to these young people. And, I referenced Barry Gordy and how he taught young people that came under his tutelage and leadership, taught them how to speak, how to conduct interviews, how to travel, to carry themselves. Yes. And I saw in the hip hop industry at that time, the raw you were, the more trouble you got into, it was seen as great. And I wanted just to talk to these men. I thought I earned the right to talk to them. When they had problems, they came to me. When they were struggling, they came to me. And I thought I had carried myself as a brother, and I just wanted to say we can do better. Well, next thing I know, I was attacked by Russell Simmons, and he called me Bob Dole and C. Dolores Tucker, and told people to stay away from me. And they did. I got calls from people like Fat Joe and Q-Tip, and they said, Russell's saying, anyone has anything to do with you, they're finished. But I was undaunted. People like KRS-One and others stood with me. And we had the campaign for dignity. And then Russell had a conference, and he wrote a letter, and he said, don't go to his summit, go to mine. And I'm inviting Minister Louis Farrakhan. And so I guess he thought he had, that was checkmate for me. And I went down to the convention, and sure enough, he had given orders. I was not to be let in. And some of the brothers were there, brothers I had known in the mosque, and And I went and they said, Brother Minister, I'm sorry, but we can't let you. And I said, brother, would you stand in the schoolhouse door like George Wallace and deny me entrance? But by the grace of God, Chuck D came and Public Enemy, and they snuck me in. And as soon as I got in, the minister was saying to Russell and myself that we shouldn't fight, that we should come together. And he said, I don't know if he's here. And someone said, here he is, he's here. And we tried, but you see, I saw where they were traveling, and I could feel it. I was closer to it than a lot of people. I was in the epicenter in Harlem, and I saw that our community was being led in a direction that I feared that it would be very hard for us to come back from. This is before Sexy Red. This is before Chicago drill music. This is before, you know, a lot of the things that we've since seen in hip hop. Young Dolph murdered. Now, you know, back then it was rare for a rapper to be killed, but today it's commonplace. And we've seen hundreds of young brothers and sisters killed. And all I was saying at the time was, this is where this thing is going. We got to stop this. And of course, that was not a popular position. And, you know, at one point, I must say, Brother Josh, I became discouraged, and I just, you know, I could see us going that way, and the forces were very powerful, and I did not have the strength at a certain point to compete with those forces. And at that time, you know, the Lord led me back into the church, and that became my focus. And I left Harlem and I went up to Roxbury, and I was there for several years. And I just watched from a distance, and I watched where we were going, and I'm deeply saddened when I think about all of those brothers that we engaged, that we talked to on a regular basis, and we tried to share the good news and an uplifting message with. You know, Suge Knight's in jail, Puffy's in jail, Russell Simmons is in Bali, you know, probably would be in jail if he was here. Certainly there have been 19 lawsuits against him.
Yes, sir.
And so I just, you know, it's not, you don't want to be right on something like that, you know, because look at how many young people have died from hip hop since the year 2000, since 1999. And it wasn't to be, because it was founded. That's the irony of it. That's what I was trying to get Suge Knight to understand. It was founded when the gangs were bad in New York in the early 70s, and it was founded to stop people from killing each other. And now, you know, we're killing each other all over the country. So we got a lot of work to do. I used to think that, you know, I would see the change in my own lifetime, and I don't know if I will, but younger people like yourself and what you're doing is very important. You know, we're talking about things that happened 30 years ago. I just turned 60. These incidents that I'm telling you about, I was in my 30s. And so there's a lot of work to be done, and we just can't give up. We've got to keep the faith and keep encouraging Black people to look to the light. We have so many bright lights in the history of our people, and how we are at this place today is mind-boggling when you think of all of the wisdom and the lights that we've produced, that we seem to know more about then than we do now. How do you go backwards? How do you go back? And that I think is the question.
Yes, sir. Powerful. And thank you, sir. And people are sending so many love all around the world. You're still young, Minister Conrad. Thank you, Reverend Conrad. So many Black lives lost. The enemies got great divide. Rest in peace to young dog. Thank you, Brother Kelvin, for saying rest in peace. My sister Mimi says, now look at Russell and Diddy. That settles the score. God was protecting you from them. Thank you, Mimi. Brother Vincent Foley, assalamu alaikum. Black Eyed. Like, it's not people just showing love. They love your ministry. They love you. They were with you in many of these instances, and the youth need to hear this. Powerful. I wanted to ask you, sir. Well, let's go right there because we have a few more questions, but I just wanted to ask you, what happened that made you make an adjustment in your career path in ministry?
Wow, that's a very complicated question. And I'll answer it by saying what I do believe. I think that God ordered my steps. And, you know, as I said, like so many of us, I grew up in the church. I did not have a great understanding of the church. I didn't really appreciate it. But in my family, you couldn't play sports if you didn't go to church. But when I began to understand Christian theology better, I began to understand the role of the church, ironically, better when I was in the nation, because Minister Farrakhan had so many great Christian friends that I would meet and be also enamored with men like Dr. Frank Madison Reed in Baltimore, just a great man of the gospel, and interacting with men like Wyatt T. Walker and others. But I never intended to return to the church. When I was removed from number 7, the minister offered me to come to Chicago. And at that time, I had already applied to Harvard Divinity School. And I decided that I wanted to go back to school. I had not done anything else in my life, and I decided I would go back to school. I hadn't done anything prior to my ministry in the nation. I came right out of college, so I decided I wanted to go to graduate school. And he said to me, University of Chicago has a great divinity school, and he's absolutely right. It's one of the finest in the world, and he encouraged my wife and I to come to Chicago. But I must tell you, and this is the truth. I was not confident, shall I say, be as charitable as I can, that some of the things I had experienced in Chicago and with laborers in Chicago, that would be a healthy place and a good place for me. And at that point in my life, I made a decision for myself, and I wanted to do it. I prayed on it, but I did not feel confident that that's what God wanted me to do. And so I went to Harvard Divinity School, and I had no intention of going back to the church. In fact, I didn't go to Union Theological Seminary or Yale Divinity School because those schools focus on a Christian ministry. Harvard had a great world religions program.
Yes, sir.
And so I was there. A couple of things happened, and eventually I came back to New York that summer, and a number of things happened. As great as the nation is, and as great as we are, when you deal with human beings, there are always issues. And
yes, sir.
After 14 years of issues, I couldn't go on. I was experiencing a lot. My family had broken up, and it was a very difficult time. And I had to do the best I could to follow what the Lord was saying to me. And so I started the movement for change, and I went back to school. I had no intention of returning to the church. In fact, I was the first Nation of Islam minister accepted into Harvard Divinity School. I went there as a nation minister, but I started studying, and I took several courses on a Baptist theologian by the name of Howard Thurman. And won't go all into it, but to make a long story short, being in the nation, I met so many wonderful people. And, you know, one of the things we have to realize in any African village or any African city, you have Christians, Muslims, those who practice traditional African religions, and we are a diverse people. Why would we be any different? If you go to Nairobi, if you go to Johannesburg, I mean, any city, you name the city in Africa, you have people who practice different faiths. And so Thurman understood that. And a lot of times, young people are turned away from the Christian church because our elders have such a narrow view of spirituality. And I knew when the elders said, there's, you know, if you don't, if you're not with Jesus, you're going to hell. I knew something was wrong with that. I knew that didn't speak to me. And so as I began to understand Thurman and his relationships with Gandhi, and him begin, you know, understanding that there's not just one theological perspective in the Christian church. There are very broad and ecumenical and interfaith perspectives. And I was very touched by Thurman, and still didn't have any intentions of going back to the church. And I had a powerful conversion experience one night there at Rockefeller Hall at Harvard Divinity School. And I found myself going back to the church. I ran into Frank Madison Reed in the airport.
Okay.
And he asked me what I was doing, and I didn't know what I was doing. And let me tell you something, that good man paid my way every weekend from New York to Baltimore to come to church. And he put me in a hotel, and he just ministered to me as a brother and a friend. He never said anything about coming back to the church. And then Dr. Calvin Otis Butts III, who had been my friend in Harlem, my colleague, he invited me to come to Abyssinian Baptist Church. And there was a United Methodist minister by the name of William James. Reverend James is written of in Claude Brown's Man-Child in the Promised Land. He had been in Harlem for maybe 60 years. And these men took an interest in me, and at a very difficult time in my life when I was estranged from my family, my teacher, many of my friends and my colleagues. That's why I'll always love your uncle, because there's not one moment that he ever turned away from me, and several other wonderful people in the nation. And so I knew when the Lord led me back into the church, I knew that I was not going to the church with any axe to grind against Islam. I turned down ministers and big ministers that wanted me to come and work with them, but they had a narrow view, and their view was, you know, I want you to say, I was blind, I was once lost, and now I'm found. I was blind, and now I see. And I couldn't bring myself to do that. It wasn't even a question, because I knew the sincerity and the commitment of the members of the nation to serve God and to be faithful to God. And so I have always have never taken a position. I paid the price. Many people have continued to raise that and use that against me, but I love God's people, and whether they are Muslim or Christian or Jewish, and I certainly love our people. and
Yes,
I
sir.
have worked with Minister Hafiz and uh, now Minister Arthur and Minister Henry. We were just together the other day at a ministers' meeting, and I would never disrespect and never forget the kindness, the goodness, and the decency of the believers that I met in the nation that meant so much to me and in my life and my ministry. And so, that's the short of it. Obviously, it's a much more complex situation than that. But I believe that God led me in the way that I've gone, but with a clear head and an open heart, and that served me well, and I can look in the mirror, and when I see the Muslim brothers and sisters, I greet them warmly. They greet me warmly, and I respect them because you have all kinds of theology. There are different uh, branches of Christian theology. There are different branches of theology in Judaism, and the same is true with Islam. And so,
Yes, sir.
when you talk about the Abrahamic family is the family of Christians, Muslims, and Jews.
Yes,
And
sir.
so, if we believe in that, we have to be a manifestation of that. And I certainly believe in that.
Excellent, Reverend. Excellent teaching. Beautiful. There's so many comments. I'm coming to all of them. People are sending you love. I just wanted to make a quick point while we come back to you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. The culmination or the peak or the prime of the Nation of Islam in the rebuilding eras, many would say in Black community society, is the Million Man March. And all of my research, I was too young to go to the Million Man March, but all of my research, the Million Man March, I keep hearing these names: Reverend Ben Chavis, Reverend James Bevel, Reverend Al Sampson, Willie Wilson, Father Flager. So I know that they're in order for us to be successful in the big scheme of things, it's going to take more than just ministers. We need the ministers, but we also need the reverends, the imams, and the fathers, and the sheikhs, the mullahs, everything. So I thank you, sir,
Absolutely.
for being a part of the vanguard in that. And so many people, whether they tell you and get the chance to tell you in person or not, but are inspired by you, we salute you. That's from the People Podcast. We definitely salute you and thank you for your transparency and letting us know. People are bearing witness all around the world saying beautiful teaching. Thank you very much. Brother Stephen said, the minister once said that Reverend Conrad reminded him of himself. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sister Mina. There's so many people bearing witness, Brother Jihad. Thank you all very much. Once it goes to YouTube, some people want to send you even more love and have even more stories. I reached out to Dr. Abdul Alim Muhammad because I was interviewing you, and I told him, and he had so many beautiful stories about you and saying your work on the campuses and just the activism. But he told me a beautiful story. He said that there was a time where finances were hard on you as the minister of the mosque and hard on the ministers around the country. And he was saying that at such a young age to have that pressure on you is something that we have not seen, and in the nation dealing with young ministers. And I told him, I said, my family has suffered financial hardships. So we thank the children and the wives and the ex-wives and the family members. We want to just, and people see you all on stage and they don't know the behind the scenes suffering and pain and sacrifice that the family members go through. So we thank you. Thank your family that we may, if I never meet your children, I hope I meet them. But if we never meet them, let them know that we salute them and know that, man, it's not easy being a minister. It's not easy being a reverend, but it's definitely not easy serving Black people. It's the hardest job in the world, So anytime someone did that at 20, in their 20s, man, it's an honor, Reverend Conrad. Thank you, sir. And I
Well,
look
that
forward
means
to
that means a lot, and I hope they will see this because, as you well know, the sacrifice of your family. When you make a commitment to Black people, whether it's in the church or in the Black Panther Party or SNCC or the nation. That comes with a great sacrifice. And, the families suffer. Many of our great leaders, if you talk to their children, they suffer. And at some level, we have to tell this story, the noble story, the glorious story, the heroic story, so that these children understand that their pain and their sacrifice was not in vain. That there was a purpose for that, and I think that helps to ease the comfort, because people judge, people condemn. I've seen people write things about me, and they just don't know. And I thank God that I've not allowed it to overwhelm me, depress me, or make me bitter. And I just keep pressing forward. And so thank you for sharing that. And I know that, I know my family is only one family
Yes,
that
sir. Yes,
struggled
sir.
greatly. And I tell you, Dr. Alim, he was also a great example of me, for me, to see sacrifice. I remember once Doc was riding high in Washington. He had a nice Lincoln, and I think it was a Mark 7. Next time I saw him, he was busted down a little bit. His wheels were not the same. I said, Doc, what happened to your Lincoln? He said, it was a casualty of war. And that taught me a lot about the things that we would lose. Abby Lincoln has a great song, and she says, throw it away, throw it away. And one of the stanzas says, the things I've lost along the way. And, all of the great ministers were an example of sacrifice. And so, we press forward. I don't think anyone in the movement, any movement, because the more you learn about all of these movements, Kwame Ture went to jail 77 times in Alabama and Mississippi during the 1960s. And I know Kwame didn't have many worldly possessions, because when he was very ill, I used to meet with him at his mother's house on Convent Avenue in Harlem. I don't think any one of us would have willingly accepted these sacrifices, but God has a way of not showing us the price that we'll have to pay to do a greater work.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I can't give too much credit, because had I been able to see down the wheel of time, perhaps I would have made other decisions. But I was very committed. And when you have powerful leaders in front of you, it's very hard not to be inspired. And that's what I tried to be to those in front of me.
Beautiful. We just have 2 more questions for you, Reverend Conrad Tillard.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I just want to read some more of the comments. Shout out to our YouTube family, Brother Musa, Brother Kente, Brother Dukes, Sister Aunt, Sister Hope. Also, S Enterprise, Barber and Beauty Products, plant-based brush wave, brushes, brush, keep your waves lined up. Kosherwave.com, 770-997-6000. There's Brother Jeffrey, Seriously Muhammad, Sister Stephanie Lisan Muhammad, kosherwave.com. Thank you very much. People in the comments are saying, thank you very much, Reverend Conrad. This is very important. Thank you for all that you've done and that you do. Mimi says, thank you and your entire family for your many sacrifices, being a PK, preacher's kid, and labor's child. Isn't easy at all. Much love to them. Everybody's just bearing witness. Thank you very much, and wonderful. I wanted to ask you, sir, now I ask every guest that comes on, what is their favorite album of all time? What is your favorite album, sir?
Well, my favorite album of all time, wow, that's a hard question, but it would have to be What's Going On, Marvin Gaye.
Yes, sir.
I think you can't beat that in terms of
the range and breadth of the ministry that he's really doing on that album. Songs in the Key of Life, Stevie Wonder.
Yes,
And
sir. Yes, sir.
those are albums that I grew up listening to. And you know, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill is right in there as one of those great albums that just really spoke life to people. And you know, I love music, as many of us do, that speaks life to our people. My own son, Amir Says Nothing. He's an artist. He has an album. He has an album called The Bright Side. He's got some great light. And I always say to him, you know, I want to hear light.
Yes, sir.
There's enough darkness in the world. I want to hear light. And so those are probably my two favorite. Although that's very hard to say because I love so many different albums.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Wonderful. Brother Reverend, I look forward. I'm going to put my siblings on the spot. They're gonna come together. We all love you and your family. We look forward to coming to your church. How can we view your sermons? How can we come visit you? Where do we visit you, sir?
So my website is conradtillard.com. My Facebook page is Conrad Bennett Tillard. My Instagram page is all connected. And so please visit. I have a radio podcast myself. I took a hiatus. I'll be starting it back up. And that's why I when you asked me to come, I said I could not come because I know what it's like to produce a show.
Yes, sir.
Because this is your ministry and
yes,
and this is how you're giving life. And so those are the best ways to contact me nationwide.
Wonderful.
And I do want to say this. I want to just extend to all of the believers my great love and my great respect. And I certainly want to extend my condolences to Supreme Captain Mustafa. His wife, Karen, grew up with my first wife, Karen, in Inglewood, and my first wife grew up in Teaneck. And she was a wonderful lady, wonderful sister. And of course, I want to extend my greatest love and prayers for the minister and Sister Farrakhan and the minister's family and all of the believers who have touched my life in a tremendous way. And you are always in my heart, and wherever I go, I will never forget the sacrifices that were made for me, for everyone that secured me, to those who drove me and drove my wife and children and secured us. I am just a man that was taught that you never forget a bridge that brought you over. And I am really very grateful for the love that I've experienced from the believers in the Nation of Islam.
Beautiful. Yes, sir. And on that positive note, one last question, Reverend Conrad Tillard, the great Reverend Conrad Tillard. Can this just be a part one? Can we get you to come back in the future? Can we get you to come back in the future, sir?
Of course. Yes, of course. You know, I could never turn you down,
Thank you very much,
Brother Josh. And I do enjoy this podcast. It brings back so many wonderful, fond memories. You know, folks that have been critical of the nation who don't understand why I would never denounce the nation. They don't understand this is family and this is my youth and my young adulthood. And so when I hear your program, I hear the testimonies, it's literally taking me back in my own journey. And so, you know, you keep doing what you're doing, because I'm hoping those that weren't around those days will really focus in and learn a lot, because I even learned a lot from listening. And I was there, but when you're there, you can't see everything. But yes, I'll come back because there's so much we didn't talk about.
Yes, sir. Wonderful.
You know, we
And on
didn't
that,
talk about Captain Sharif. We didn't talk about Supreme Captain Sharif and Minister Khaled, and barely scratched the surface with Captain Dennis. But he was an extraordinary man in my life and development. He certainly kept me on my toes, and I grew immeasurably dealing with him, learning from him, and working with him every day in Harlem and throughout the 5 boroughs and the whole area and the nation. So God bless you and have a wonderful evening.
yes, sir. God bless you as well, sir.
All right.
Thank you all for watching. This is Joshua Leonard Muhammad signing
Grace
off
and
of the
peace.
People's Podcast. Yes, sir. Wonderful. All right.